It's afternoon. It's afternoon, guys. Anyway, thanks for being here. And so we wanted to call a press conference so you guys could ask as many questions as possible on education and anything related to the state of the state. We had that last week. We're deep involved in an educational discussion right now, which personally I think is fantastic. And the first thing I want to do is I want to applaud the legislature, seriously. No, I'm not up for re-election, so this isn't a campaign thing. But for years, and even when I was in the Senate, what we would do for 30 days in the beginning of the year is not a lot. These guys have jumped right into one of the most important, I think, crucial issues of our time. So I want to commend the Senate and I want to commend the House. And because a lot of people have said, and you probably heard it, feels like the last couple of days of the session. And that's the way it should feel, that we're involved and we're engaged in heavy-duty issues that I think can help Alaska, certainly can help our kids and help our teachers. And so I want to thank them for that. And I know that those discussions are ongoing, those discussions are intense, and they should be. But there's a solution, and there is a package that I think can come together. What people need to remember is Alaska is not a extreme state on one side or the other. And when it comes to education, everybody wants our kids to do well. And when it comes to education, everybody wants our teachers to do well. I could probably ask you guys, can you name your one of your favorite teachers? And you go, bam. I can ask you to name, I don't know, one of your favorite governors. You might not be able to think about that. But every kid has a teacher in their life that has made a difference in their life. And so what we are supporting is obviously the teacher incentive retention approach, which will be a study, which people need to really understand what we're trying to do here. I came up to the state in the early 80s. Every year there were 500 to 700 openings in education. It's getting worse because we're in a very competitive world now. The rest of the world and the rest of the country are trying to figure out ways to get more teachers. We're also introducing an apprentice program that would help get paraprofessionals geared up. We're, and have been for some time, involved in professional housing. Most people don't realize this because I do a bad job at tooting one's horn, but 2001, when I was in the Northwest Arctic, we helped start what is today the professional teaching a housing program with AHFC and our federal delegation. So we're trying to march through what are the issues that we could fix or help with to retain and recruit teachers. And what we want to be able to do is for 3 years study whether a significant amount of money will make a difference. What I find fascinating, and again I applaud the legislature, but what I find fascinating, and I'm going to be blunt, is the so-called supporters and acolytes of, for example, NEA, who I thought forever, and I was part of NEA at one time, I was part of the School Boards Association at one time, I was part of the Superintendents Association one time. What I'm hearing now just makes no sense to me. Because what we argued for all the time was resources in the classroom. Got to keep the teachers, got to have great teachers, got to grow our own teachers. And what I'm hearing now is part of the argument is, well, maybe not this way. Put it all in the BSA, that'll do it. Have we ever tried putting it all in the BSA in the past? Yes. Yes. So we think it's time to do something different and answer some questions. Let me move to our charter schools for a moment. Those are schools supposedly for elite kids in Alaska. You have to be a very wealthy person to send your kid to a charter school. You guys saw the press, you saw the committee meeting hearings with the folks from Harvard that did this study. They didn't say that. They said the opposite. As a matter of fact, our charter schools are actually doing better because of kids that aren't white. This is what the research says. Nice. Anyway, we'll get into the energy issues later in a different press conference. Okay, and the lights will remain on. Anyway, and so this is not a game. This is not a political game. This is not something Dunleavy's doing for re-election. This stuff should have been done years ago. Like a lot of stuff should have been done years ago in the state of Alaska. When I talk about cranes or I talk about opportunities, this stuff should have been done. So unbeknownst to a lot of folks, because this is the first study that was ever done on charter schools that measures outputs through the NAEP scores, lo and behold, we're tops in the nation. You would think you would hear parade music and people dancing in the streets. But in some sectors, this has caused a problem because it doesn't fit the narrative. How could this be? How could Alaska be performing well? This is going to screw things up because we have our usual approach to education in Juneau. Don't do much about it until the last couple weeks. Turn up the heat, declare it a disaster if a large sum of money is not deposited somewhere. And then once that happens, everything goes back to normal. Things are good now. Well, things aren't good. That would be a lie. What people don't want to talk about is part of the funding issue is we're losing student population. I talk about that all the time. The world is losing population. Some people are celebrating that. They think it's probably the best thing in the world to eventually give this whole piece of ground called the world back to the birds and the bees. A lot of us don't think that's probably the best for civilization and humankind. But we need more people. We need more kids. We need better performance. We need great energy policy. We need to get to say yes. And I got to tell you, for the life of me, I am stunned at this idea that you have the best performing charter schools in the world. I got to tell you, any moment I'll be called to go talk somewhere nationally about our charter schools. But here in the state, many, not all, but many that are vocal and are part of the educational establishment, they're trying to figure out what part of the Jenga gang they can pull out so the whole educational reform package falls apart. Because in the end, I can guarantee you this. If I stood at this microphone today and just said, we're going to shove in with a D9 tons of money into the BSA, and that's it, I'd be lauded as a hero. But I didn't run on that ticket. I didn't knock on people's doors and say, hey, this is Governor Dunleavy, I'm running for governor. I want to give a ton of money to the educational establishment, and we're not going to worry about your kid. They'll be fine. I didn't do that. The other thing I find interesting is I would challenge somebody to find a previous governor in the state of Alaska that has had more educational experience than I. I mean, that's a fact. Yet, in some quarters, that's a problem. Why? Because I know education. I know it inside out. And I can tell you this, and I would bet my retirement, if you just put money in the BSA, there will be no change in performance. Because we've done that year after year. Does that mean that schools and school districts don't need money? They do, and we're putting money in the BSA. But why don't we target it to the problems we know we have? Classroom teachers and retaining them. What's wrong with that idea? We measured for 3 years and let's see what happens. No, people don't want to do that. That's a bad idea. Why? I don't know, maybe it'll work. Maybe that's the bad idea. Charter schools, we can't do that. There are wait lists for charter schools. This idea that people are speaking on behalf of the parents, the teachers, and the kids of charter schools that aren't part of charter schools, that charter schools somehow are negative, that's insane. So I just want to start off with this, just to make myself clear to the people of Alaska. Not a lot of activity out there. We know we have performance issues in our neighborhood schools. It's not the teacher's fault. That's not the kid's fault. These schools have become politicized over the decades. It's a fact. But when you get people that want to coalesce around a mission in a charter school, and they want to get their kids to that charter school, and those teachers want to work in that charter school, amazing things have happened. Why don't we want to replicate it? All right, Jeff.
Okay, we'll start with questions here in the room. We'll start with James Brooks with the last question. Sure.
Governor, during the State of the State, you mentioned the electrical transmission program that AEA is working on.
Yeah.
Some of the legislators have talked about a general obligation bond for that. Are you working on any general obligation bond?
We're running scenarios, but there's no commitment to a GO bond. We want to see what some scenarios are. We're looking at any and all tools that may be available to us to be able to put Alaska on an energy track that's going to be reliable, secure, and hopefully as cheap as possible for customers. But we're running scenarios.
And just to follow up briefly, do you expect those scenarios to be done in time for action this session, or would this?
Yeah, I hope so. That's the plan. Yeah, hopefully soon. Mm-hmm.
Okay, now we'll go to Claire Strumpel with the Alaska Beacon.
Thank you. Governor, I have a question about efforts to reduce taxes or royalties to increase exploration and production, and I'm curious how this addresses the problem of a small, isolated market.
Yeah, that's very good. So we can't wield in our power. That's one of our problems. We've been riding the gas horse in Cook Inlet for some time. You know, when that field first opened up, oil was certainly the lucrative product, and gas was in the way. And they figured out ways to monetize gas. We used to heat a lot with coal in Alaska previous to that. But what's happened over time is that gas has been used up. It was used in a fertilizer plant and the LNG export. But there's still pockets of gas, just like up at Prudhoe Bay, Capart. Big pools, but now we're finding other pools, Pica, Willow, et cetera. So there's gas there, but sometimes the economics aren't there for small producers, and there's small leaseholders now in the inlet. And so what we want to be able to do is come up with a way that monetizes the gas that works for them but works for us as well, in order for us to get more gas out of that. I also talked about the fact that we're going to need storage as well. You saw a presentation by NSTAR the other day. They built storage back in somewhere around 2010, 2011, because we could see this coming. And so we're going to look at incentivizing some more gas, but also being able to store it, especially in the summer months. Bank it in the summer months, because we just saw what happened when it gets real cold. So if we can bank that gas, and in the summer, whether people are turning on their thermostats because you don't need the heat as much in the summer, and their lights don't need to be on as much because of the summer, and if we have another energy mix at play, whether it's wind, solar, and other energy, we probably can buy some decent time. But I will say this is important. This is another discussion that's been going on for decades. And we've got to make some decisions. And under my administration, my goal before I get out of office is to make sure that Alaska is independent, energy independent and secure in state, and that our educational system is responding to the needs of our kids and our teachers. I'm going to work overtime on a handful of issues, and that's one of them.
Okay, let's go to Haley Lehman with the Fairbanks Daily News Miner.
Good afternoon. In the State of the State, you spoke about how public safety is one of your top priorities and how you've increased funding for Alaska State Troopers and VPSOs. And Commissioner Cockrell spoke the other day in a committee meeting about how there are a lot of resources dedicated to urban centers like the Mat-Su and not as many resources dedicated to rural areas. With this, while there has been increased funding to Department of Public Safety, there are still many vacancies with troopers and VPSOs. I was wondering if you have ideas for solutions to increase public safety in these rural areas that folks have expressed concerns about?
Good question. Can you grab me a glass of water? We have increased professional housing in rural Alaska to house troopers and work with communities on VPSO accommodations as well. We're going to continue to do that. We have increased salaries for troopers, signing bonuses for troopers. We've put more money into VPSOs. We're creating more positions for VPSOs. We're the first ones to put in an actual coordinator in DPS for VPSOs because it's that important. Yeah, thanks. We will continue to put resources in. If you look at my budgeting over the last several years, that budget has grown dramatically. There's a reason for that. We needed to do it. Public safety is job one for any state. And we've got, historically, some pretty significant crime rate issues. The result of this is our crime rates generally are on a downward trend. Sexual assault, which is, I consider one of the main banes of the state of Alaska. I mean, it's been a problem forever. It's on a downward trend. But the thing is, you can't take your foot off the gas pedal. So we're adding MMIP investigators. We're adding sexual assault and children crime investigators. We're going to keep pounding at this problem as long as I'm in office as well. We also have a bill in on fentanyl that would charge dealers in the case of a death for second-degree murder. Now, there's some countries that execute dealers, and obviously we're not proposing that. But I only bring that up because you got to be able to interdict these drugs as well, which are causing problems, not just in urban Alaska, but rural Alaska. So you're going to see significant resources continue to go in rural Alaska and in some of our urban areas. But we've done a lot of things right now for rural Alaska, and we're going to continue to do that on the public safety issue.
Okay, and let's go to Eric Stone with Alaska Public Media.
Hey there. So what do you think of you talked a lot about recruitment and retention of teachers and how that's a big problem. What do you think of the pension bill that passed the Senate? Folks are saying that might be a good recruitment and retention tool.
That's not what we're picking up on in various discussions, but also pieces of research that younger folks, I'm a tier one, full disclaimer, I'm a tier one retiree. I was a teacher. But younger folks appear to be less interested in that. I'm sure somebody will trot out research that shows there's some younger folks that are interested in it. But I could tell you this, that if you are a new teacher and you have student loans, and you have car debt, and you come to Alaska, and if our bill is, this bill is passed with $5,000, $10,000, and $15,000, you're going to be able to pay off your student loans or make a big dent in them. You're going to help make some car payments. And so those immediate needs for a lot of folks, including young folks, incredibly important to be able to put a down payment on a house. So I would say that this issue that we're talking about in terms of recruitment and retention will have a much larger impact on teachers. And the money we put into troopers will have a large impact. We're having problems all over the country in recruiting teachers, law enforcement professionals. But we're approaching this because we believe it will work. But we're also saying, going back to teachers for a moment, we're also saying that let's research it. I'm going to challenge you guys. It's not a gauntlet across the face, but it's a challenge. Ask the people that oppose the elements of this bill, what's their answer for performance, and what's their answer to recruit and retain? And do me a favor, don't fall for the gobbledygook or the doublespeak. Ask specific questions, nail them down. How would you propose doing the same thing year after year after year after year will get us to different outcomes? Ask them that question.
And if I can just follow up on the Senate Bill 88 in particular, the pension bill, if it came to your desk as it is right now, as it was passed by the Senate, would you sign it? Would you veto it?
And this is not an out. I haven't seen the bill. I haven't looked at it for some time. I know there's competing bills coming out too. But I'll tell you this. We got to also stop being a Make-A-Wish Foundation. Meaning there's a lot of great ideas, but if you don't have the money to be able to do it, you got to allocate your limited resources to the places you think are going to have the best outcome. And that'll be a decision I have to make. So I'll view the bill when it comes up. I'll get briefings from staff and so forth, but we'll take a look at it when that gets close to my desk.
Okay, and up next is Mark Sabatini with the Juneau Empire.
Governor, about your executive orders, which are now undergoing some scrutiny in the Senate and beginning in the House. So far, the justification on the orders and statements to your office essentially come down to they're being issued to improve the efficiency of government. And since I'm a Juneau newspaper, I'll use the Marine Highway Operations Board as an example, but it could obviously apply to many of these orders. Specifically, other than the fact it gives you the power to appoint an all-new board on July 1st, how does giving you all that power, taking power away from other people with appointments on that board, how does that result in an improvement in efficiency?
It's streamlined. It's going to be streamlined. Not tell you what to do at night, but oftentimes I read the history of the Constitution and the actual framers and their statements in there. They had a real concern about the sprawl and growth of government. Not the legislative side, but the legislature, they had experience with the territorial legislature, putting growth and sprawl on the executive. We have 137 boards and commissions. It's not shrinking, it's growing. There's 3 branches of government. I'm held responsible. You guys hold me responsible. The voters hold me responsible for the efficient implementation of those functions to maintain operational integrity. That's me. But if we come across where we believe there are boards that need to be changed or merged, or somehow altered in order to get a better outcome, we're going to do it. We believe that having another layer, a pseudo-executive, because there's only 3 branches, another layer, makes it more difficult to get better outcomes in that issue. You guys having your own press conference or what?
No,
Oh.
I just want to add a very quick follow-up. What flaw is there in having the House and Senate appoint 2 members of the Marine Highway Operations Board?
Because if they're at odds with the DOT commissioner or the executive, if they want to go one direction or another, we may not be able to fix the problems with the Marine Highway system. That's the answer, Mark. The framers of the Constitution wanted a very strong executive, and in many cases for that reason. They wanted decisions made and things executed. I believe if they were awake today, they were with us today, they'd be somewhat shocked at the lack of problems that have been solved in this state over the decades. And so we're trying to solve issues. Are there some people that aren't going to like it? Of course. There's some people that aren't going to like paying teachers more. They're doing other things. That's been the story of Alaska. That's my answer, Mark.
Okay. And Jeff Lanfield.
Well, Governor,
Hi,
that
Jeff.
slick back hairstyle there.
What's that?
Like that slick back hairstyle. Your hair,
Thank
I
you,
like your
Jeff.
hairstyle.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you about the permanent fund dividend. I had heard from several Alaskans who were having issues getting their PFDs determined, so I put in a request with the Department of Revenue, and for 2023, the current backlog is almost 24,000, which is 3.5% or $31 million, and it's about 1,200 for the 2022. But I asked people at Revenue who had been there for a while, and former people, and they said that's a pretty exorbitant number. So I'm curious why there's a 24,000 backlog on undetermined
Yeah,
dividend.
not trying to dodge it, but I'll get back to you on that. I mean, I'm just saying that's something that I had not heard in some time, so I want to follow up on it, and I'll get you an answer. That's my promise.
Okay. And now Becky Bohr with the Associated Press.
Hi, Governor. What we've heard from teachers and school administrators and other advocates are that you can't look at classrooms in isolation, that there's support staff that are needed, there's insurance, there's energy, there's other things. And the fights over education money make it hard to plan, and that feeds into recruiting and other issues. Has there been discussion about a study, an adequacy study, that kind of looks at where Alaska actually wants to be in outcomes and what it's going to cost or what it'll take to
There's a whole
do
bunch
that?
of studies, and what I can do is talk with the commissioner that can point you to some of them. And keep in mind, we have money in the BSA in our approach. The approach that the House is taking has money in the BSA. So we recognize that custodians have to be paid and that paraprofessionals have to be paid. There's no one saying that they shouldn't be paid and treated well. But the issue for decades has been classroom teachers. That's the issue for decades. And so you've talked to teachers. I've talked to teachers. I've talked to administrators. I talked to board members. And all of that has resulted, and there's been studies. We commissioned a study early on in my administration to really look at what it is that teachers are saying. Dr. Barbara Adams conducted that study. And Dr. Adams is well respected in the state of Alaska. One of the top issues was pay. Well, we want to confirm that through this study. So, again, I gotta be honest with you, but it really amazes me that we may have come up with a possible solution to increase retention and recruitment, and people don't want to hear it. You always have to ask the question why. You know, you gotta ask why. Why don't they? I think to some degree there's really a fight over who controls the educational establishment in Alaska. Is it the state and its people? Is it the representatives? Or is it NEA Alaska or other groups? I talked about special interests in the state of the state. Everywhere there's special interests. It's just the way it is. It's okay. And consultants and lobbyists and others represent them. That's the way it is. A lot of those folks are great people. But my job is to make sure that every kid has an opportunity to perform well. My job is to fix issues when I'm confronted. What are you going to do, Dunleavy, about the teacher turnover? What are you going to do about the teacher turnover, Dunleavy? How are we going to get more teachers, Dunleavy? Well, this is an approach. Now it's going to, what about the custodians? Got money in the BSA. It's going to help custodians. Let's fix the problems we can. But I'm going to say it again. Just putting more money in the BSA, which we do, is not going to give us different results.
Okay. Our next question is from Sean McGuire with the Anchorage Daily News.
Hi, Governor. Just turning to energy again. If you see the royalty relief not incentivizing some of these smaller producers to...
Say that again, Sean, I'm sorry.
If the royalty relief does not lead to more production from these smaller producers, we heard yesterday Representative McKay talking about giving away a giveaway, and I mean, I think the inference there was something like a cashable credits. Is that something you would support to try and get more gas in cooking?
I mean, I was up up north of us here in Anchorage and the Matsu here last 2 days, so and involved in other things. I didn't hear that. That's news to me. I'd have to find out what he's thinking, to be honest with you.
But just in general about cash?
What I would say is that we're all trying to figure out ways to get back to a reliable energy system. So I would have to sit down with the representative and actually see what he's thinking, to be honest with you.
Okay. Now let's go to Steve Kirsch with Alaska's News Source.
Hello, Governor. So my question for you is, Anchorage School District, they've said that they're dealing with a $100 million shortfall. They're tapping into emergency savings. And, recently there was a joint House and Senate Education Committee meeting, people wearing pins, $1,400 BSA. So this is kind of a two-part question. One, can you say at this point what you would be comfortable with the BSA being set at with 300? Is there a range that you're looking at? And number two, those schools that just don't have faith in this comprehensive education package, that want that BSA increase and are dealing with these shortfalls, can you say at this time, do you guys feel like this is just poor fiscal management by some school districts not managing their budget, working within their means?
Well, certainly there's some school districts that aren't managing their budget. There's one here in town. Excuse me, let me rephrase that. There are certainly school districts, one here in town, that have had problems managing their budget. I used to manage budgets as a superintendent and as a school board president. I feel for the people here in Juneau, to be perfectly honest with you, and I'm not kicking Juneau when it's down. We're helping it. DED, our commissioner, is helping Juneau. You should also ask some questions to my commissioner, who, Dr. Dina Bishop, was the superintendent of Anchorage. She kind of has an idea where there's money, or could be money, and she kind of has an idea of how there's budgeting. So for example, in some school districts, you have PCNs, positions, that are funded, that you never really fill, and you use that money for other parts of your program. But in a budgeting spreadsheet, it would look like that money is dedicated to that position. Now, I'm not indicating that there's anything illegal going on. I think everything is being accounted for following statutes. But if Anchorage is, and I'll throw this out there, if Anchorage is having a hard time accounting, let us know and we'll come in and help you with it. We'll help Anchorage if they can't do it the right way, or they're having a hard time with it. We'll help them. We'll help them. They want the help that a lot of school districts want, is just the BSA, and that's like some type of salve or poultice. You put it on a wound and it makes it better. I don't know what it really means. But we'll partner with you, Anchorage, and we'll go in and we'll help you understand the books, and we can all be on the same page. It's interesting, if you go to get a house loan for a home, you can't just walk into a bank and say, I want $1 million. Yeah, but no, don't ask any questions. Just give me the $1 million. I mean, I can win a pin, or I can wear a pin too that says, give me $1 million for my house. You have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that money is being spent the right way. We have a fiduciary responsibility to help people if there's a problem. So I would suggest people open up their books, let DED go in and help them out. And then we can see where they need targeted assistance. There's no doubt with inflation on energy and a whole host of things, school districts need targeted assistance. But why, when you look at the spreadsheets, are there some school districts that seem to be in balance or okay and others that don't? One thing that also has to be discussed, and it's just the reality, and we mentioned earlier, your student population is dropping because people aren't having they're not having kids like we used to. That's going to continue. So as that continues, and you're asking for more in the BSA, at what point do you start to say we got to do things differently? And that's where the discussion is at.
Okay, let's go to the teleconference line. We'll take our first question from Iris Samuels with the Anchorage Daily News. Iris, your question, please.
Hi, Governor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I have two questions related to education. And the first is, I'm wondering what you see as a necessary component in an education package to gain your support. And then my other question is specifically about the teacher bonus proposal. A legislative attorney has said that that could raise some legal challenges potentially under the state constitution because it treats teachers differently based on geographic location, and it could also interfere with the bargaining power of educator unions. So I'm just wondering if that's a cause of concern for you.
No, it's not. What was the other part of the question?
What's the must-have items?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks, Sean. The must-have items are we're going to support things that work well, like charter schools, and make them more available to parents and students and teachers that want to be part of a charter school process, and not to limit them and shut them down or somehow make it difficult for that to happen. Why would we not want to invest in things that are really working? I want to answer the question on teacher recruitment and retention. You can go back 50 years, and there's been studies and discussions and news articles on retention and recruitment in Alaska. We have our challenges, especially in our remote communities. Not a lot of infrastructure, climate, weather, travel, you name it. We currently pay workers in the executive, troopers and others, more money to go to hard-to-fill areas. So this practice is somewhat used in the private sector. Sometimes people get paid more because they're being compensated for job issues or location, et cetera. We want to get to a point where some of our small remote school districts aren't having to scramble every year to replace people. That there's people knocking on the doors to go there. When that happens, you end your recruitment and retention issues. Let's find out. I think it's going to work. I don't really know what those that oppose this, I'm not really sure what they're afraid of. That it might work? Let's find out.
Okay, and our next question on the teleconference line is from Jazz Garrett with KINY. Jazz, your question, please.
Hi, Governor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So I think I heard you say earlier that you would provide an update on this later on, but I was interested in the state's response to addressing food stamp backlog in light of a lawsuit being pushed forward.
You want to touch on that?
Sure.
You want to repeat the question?
No, I heard it. For the record, I'm Tyson Gallagher, Chief of Staff to Governor Dunleavy. I spoke with you all during the budget rollout. Just to give an update on that information, as projected back in December, our current backlog is about 4,000 applications, and as we stated then, we're projected to be out of that backlog by the end of February. So we're continuing to move on course. We've requested those resources from the legislature. Appreciate their support, but we should be out of that backlog by the end of February.
Okay, Governor, we have a online question from Margie Bauman at the Cordova Times. Why all this emphasis on millions of dollars and more funds for charter and homeschooling, while public schools, who serve over 90% of the children in Alaska, are having to cut back on programs and teacher student levels? This does not seem to make sense for public schools.
Yeah, thanks, Margie. These are all public schools. You know, you don't have to agree with me, but I'm just letting you all know. They're all public schools. Our charter schools are public schools with public school students, with public school teachers with certificates, trying to achieve a public educational outcome. Our home schools, there are private homeschoolers not associated with the state, lots of those folks, but your public home schools are public schools. I keep hearing this, it's an error, this erroneous thing that charters and homeschools are not public. So I think what Margie's trying to say is neighborhood schools is what sometimes we refer to them as, your traditional schools. Not everybody can do well in a traditional school. I ran the Matsu Central School for a while. I can sit here for hours and tell you the specific cases as to why a parent brought their kids to that program. The young lady that was rear-ended on the road and was severely disabled as a result of that. Mother looks at me and says, can't bring her, it's not going to work for us to bring her to the neighborhood school. The kid that was traumatized by other students will not go to school, but needs to be educated. The parent that works periodically throughout the world needs to bring their kids with them. That's number one. Number two, we're not forcing charter schools on people. They're banging on the doors for more charter schools. The parents are. The kids are. And in many cases, teachers that want to teach there are. Why wouldn't we want to support that, especially if the outcomes show that we're doing well? My hope is that all of our schools are performing well. But right now, what are we asking in the charter schools? To allow the state to agree to a charter if a school district doesn't want to do it. I think that will allow us to expand charter schools. I think that will allow us to expand potentially existing charter schools, so there is no more wait list. But the charter schools are performing fabulously, according to this study, and it's doing really well for our minority kids. Our minority kids are doing well in charter schools. This is some of the equity discussions you hear all the time. We got to help those underserved kids. We got to help those kids that, they got 2 strikes against them. Our charter school scores actually go up when you include them in the mix. Well, that's cause for celebration. So we're going to fund our neighborhood schools. Nobody said we're not going to fund our neighborhood schools. But we need to build upon what's really working and what is research has shown is working for a cross-section of our kids. I keep looking at you guys, but you guys didn't answer the question. Sorry.
Okay, let's go back to the room for some questions. We have some time left. James Brooks with the Alaska Beacon.
Governor, switching topics here. This week, legislators have been briefed about a pending federal National Guard deployment down south. What are your thoughts about using your authority to deploy the National Guard down south to Texas at the request of Governor Abbott?
So, when President Trump was in, he requested of the states assistance on the border with National Guard troops. We sent them down. The federal government paid for that as part of their responsibility with the National Guard. I've made it clear that I support, and I think most Americans support, the battle that Governor Abbott has on his hands with regard to open borders, unlimited rushes across our boundary, and dispersing throughout our country individuals that we're not sure in some cases whether those folks are bad actors or not. Now, before somebody prints something and before I see a headline, I would imagine everybody in this room are descendants of immigrants. I think we need more people. I think we need more immigrants. And I've always said, build a strong wall with many doors, many ways to get into this country. So getting back to Texas, they're being overrun by human beings in many cases that are desperate for work, et cetera, et cetera. And that seemed to work fine for some parts of the country and some politicians until they were dropped off at Nantucket, dropped off in New York City, dropped off in Chicago, dropped off in San Francisco. It didn't work so well at that point. So my answer is, for me to send the Guard down will cost us about, according to my General Sachs, about $1 million a month for 100 folks. We'll test the waters with the legislature to see if they're willing to fund that. And I wouldn't mind helping Texas with their issue on the border. We wouldn't have to. There's ways to solve this issue too. But Texas is being overrun. Well, how does that impact Alaska? We're interdicting fentanyl almost on a daily basis up here. We're not immune to what happens on the border. Thank goodness we don't have much of a border issue up here with our adjacent neighbors. But nonetheless, that issue, if allowed to continue unfettered for a period of time, you're already hearing mayors in New York saying it's going to kill us. Chicago, we can't handle it. Denver, it's out of control. And so we need to get a handle on the border. I'll get a read on the legislature if they want to help appropriate money for that. But I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. And I also there is some nonsense, and James, it's not coming from you. There's some nonsense that by doing that you're setting up a new Confederate army against the Union, or you're setting up a flashpoint between Americans. That's not the case, and that's not something I would want. And I know Governor Abbott. That's not what he wants. So I'll have discussions, and I'll survey and talk with leaders if they want to help out.
And just briefly to follow up, do you think, is this a request you would put in the supplemental budget or some other way officially to the legislature?
I'm going to have to talk with my OMB folks to find out what legal avenues there are for us to assist them if that's the case. Yeah.
Okay, let's go to Claire Strimple with the Alaska Beacon.
Thank you. We've talked about the outstanding performance in charter schools and how neighborhood schools results aren't anywhere near.
No, that's not, let me clarify. I don't mean to interrupt you. Mm-hmm. We have a number of neighborhood schools in which they're performing well. We're talking about system-wide, but go ahead.
Yes, system-wide, neighborhood schools are not performing as well. Has there been research to discover the reasons for that disparity? And
yeah,
are there
in some cases, the research will point to turnover, constant turnover of teachers. Inability to hire. We're hiring folks from overseas now in J-1 visas from the Philippines and other countries to fill in spots. Yeah, that's a big part of it. If you have constant churn or you can't fill a position till December when they're supposed to be there in August, that's a problem. So there is research. I think she's got to follow up. Jeff, you ran too fast.
Jeff and Jeff working together.
Make note of that.
And do you have a sense of why that's not the case in charter schools? If it's not,
I think I do.
Okay.
So charter schools, have a much more narrow focus. And as a result, it appeals to a cross-section, or a section of, I should say, of society in Alaska. Whether it's a Waldorf approach, whether it's a science STEM-based approach, people want to coalesce around that. And so you're going to get less turnover there because there's more alignment as to what people want. There used to be a time in this country where even your neighborhood schools were focused on reading, writing, and math. They were focused on what they used to call VOTEC. They were focused on skill and knowledge base approaches. And more of it, that's not being emphasized as much. That's why we passed the reading bill. And I'm going to give a shout out. That was a bipartisan move on the part of a number of senators that are currently here, a number of House members. Former Senator Tom Begich, who's on the opposite side of the political spectrum of myself, we both agreed we need to do more for reading. And so charter schools are a more focused approach. Homeschools, similar. I really think we got to get back, and I think this will start the discussion really in earnest. What is it you want all of our schools to do? Because it should be reading, writing, and math at the top, as opposed to just equity, just historically underserved people. Historically underserved people are blowing the lid off of our charter school scores. That's a route to help underserved people. So public schools, in my opinion, have been really damaged by politics. Yeah, and I'm a politician. But since they're public, everyone gets a say. And there's constant competing groups. And there's constant pulling and yanking back and forth. I can tell you this. One thing I have in common with all teachers is when we were thinking about what we wanted to do, and we were 18 and 19 or 17, and we wanted to go into teaching, it was to help kids. It wasn't to protest against the Second Amendment. It wasn't to change America because it's terrible. It was to help kids, help them learn how to read, help them with math, help them with science. That's what it was all about. And I talk with teachers all the time. And one of the reasons they're getting out of the profession is they can't make sense of it anymore. There's all these competing interests. So that's another lesson to draw from charter schools, to be perfectly honest with you, is if you focus more on certain things, especially math, science, reading, it could be done through some of our charter schools through language, different Spanish immersion, approaches to how you learn reading, writing, and math, you're going to get better results.
Okay. Jeff Lanfield has another question.
Governor, I just wanted to ask about the Broadband Access grant, the bill, the SB 140, which was originally for that, and it got loaded up with all the stuff in the House. The E-rate program requires applications to be submitted by the end of the month, so I'm wondering if you support any kind of, a lot of the telecoms stand to make, more money from this and getting the reimbursement from the federal government from 25 megabits to 100.
You said something I couldn't understand. Go to stand or go to support? What'd you say?
Would you support a standalone bill by the end of February to get the E-rate or the broadband access increase from 25 to? And I'm just curious because GCI was pretty supportive of your campaign, and a couple of your staffers here used to work for GCI. So I'm just curious if, I know they've been lobbying for that, and that means quite a bit to them, from 25 megabits
let's
to
address the inference. Let's address the inference that if somebody's supportive of my campaign, therefore I have to do something on their behalf.
How does you have to? I'm just saying they.
No, I understand that. No, but I'm saying that'll be the inference that the viewers will draw. So I have to address it. People that run for office get a lot of donations for a lot of reasons. But I think 99.99% of all folks that support or donate understand that when you're in office, you've got to legislate and govern on behalf of all Alaskans, not just one group or one outfit or one whatever. And I think that's clear to me. And so, answering, going back to the heart of the question, you'll never get educational reform in this state. We've seen it. Unless you come up with some multi-approach like we're doing with this bill. And why do I say that? Because Alaska's not a far exclusive Republican state in the legislature. It's not exclusively Democrat. It's in the middle. And so there are going to be some folks that can stop this from happening or stop that from happening unless we get in the bill the parts, and especially the reforms, and the money to run the schools. And so I would say that we got people working earnestly. And one of the reasons I was excited to come down here today is because I think we're getting close to a package that will work. I'm not going to say any more than that at this point, but I think the idea of splitting things off is maybe a little premature. And so I think we're gonna know something here in the next the next couple days, to be honest with you.
Okay, we have a few minutes left. We'll try and squeeze in a few more questions. Let's go to Haley Lehman with the Fairbanks Daily Newsminer.
Hi, Governor. You've said today that the world is losing population, and you've previously said that you're unapologetically pro-life. I was wondering if you have any plans to introduce pro-life related legislation this session?
If I thought it had a chance, I would. I mean, I make no mistake about that. I don't hide from that at all. I would, but I don't think there's a chance of something like that passing. Some people may not agree with that and say you should, keep working it. I am pro-life. What does that mean? We all know it's a difficult decision. But we are in a population decline. The entire world is starting to it's peaking out. So what does that mean? What's the future look like? I mean, I don't want to stand here and, talk about our wax and wane on AI and robots and you don't need people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of crazy. But we got to the point where we are in this civilization, and this is really important, because we've had so many people And in that pool of so many people, you were able to get unbelievable ideas and solutions that built this civilization. It was people that took us to the moon. It's people that understand the universe. It's people that are solving cancer. It's people that are doing heart transplants. The more people you have, the more opportunity we have to solve problems. So some people are pro-life for religious reasons. Some people are pro-life because of the economic reasons. Some people are atheists and are pro-life because they just think people have a right to be here. But I'll continue to work with people, and when there's opportunities to bring as many people into this world, that's what I believe in. I hope that answered your question.
Okay. Eric Stone with Alaska Public Media.
Thank you very much. So you talked about the bonus proposal as a study, as sort of a pilot program to see if it works. And of course, in the report from the Governor's Council on Teacher Retention and Recruitment, of course, salary and benefits were near the top there, or at the top.
And that was input from teachers.
And so I'm curious, if we're facing this same issue a year from now, and the bonus proposal is passed, and it hasn't made a difference, what then? What are some other ideas to improve recruitment and retention?
If there's not agreement to allow the study to take place to see if it actually works, you're going to see more of this. South to South Dakota, south to Texas, south to Florida. Those people need walls because there's so many people coming in from the rest of the country. I'd love to have that problem. But part of it is, I said it in the State of the State. An idea is floated that could solve issues, bam, shot out of the air. Whether it's an educational issue, whether it's an energy issue, whether it's an investment issue for folks from the outside. We've become really, really good in Alaska at shooting down opportunity. So if this doesn't pass this year, you're going to have people vote on their own. There'll be parents that will either leave or send more kids to homeschool or send more kids to charter schools. I think that'll be a terrible thing for our neighborhood schools. I really believe our neighborhood schools, and there are many that are good and great, but generally I think that system can be improved. But you're not going to get there by just saying, okay, got it, got the message. Here's a check for $1.2 billion. Go spend it any way you want. Account for it any way you want. We don't even care about your accounting. Just do whatever you want with it. And then we're going to come back and wonder, why are we performing better? Why are we still losing teachers? We've been through this. It's not, the future's already happened in the past. It's going to happen again if nothing changes.
Sorry, if I could just follow up on that. I was asking more about if the bonuses pass and they become law, and then we don't see improvements in recruitment and retention, what else should we try next?
Well, then we go back to, we work simultaneously and we go back to what the teachers have said in some of these studies. Whether it's management issues, whether it's just too difficult for some to want to go to certain parts of Alaska because of the lack of infrastructure. We've got to have to go down that list. I believe the research will show that'll incentivize people to stay and come. It's happening all over the country. Legislators, as we speak right now, and governors are talking about more resources for teachers. It's happening right now as we speak. So I'm confident the research will show that it actually does work.
Okay, and we have time for one last brief question from Sean at the Anchorage Daily News.
Governor, you've spoken at length about homeschools, charter schools. One of the criticisms of your policy proposal is that it will diminish local control, that this is basically a backdoor into vouchers.
That's ridiculous. Not you. That question is ridiculous. We've been through, I introduced vouchers. We have a Blaine Amendment. I'm not introducing vouchers. Okay, there's going to be some people that anything Dunleavy does is for nefarious reasons, okay? How do high-performing, look, it'd be one thing if the charter schools were performing poorly, and I was like, we got to put more money into those guys. They're performing better than any charter school system in the entire country, the United States of America. Not in my imagination, not a figment of something. Researchers from Harvard. What are they afraid of? They're coming up with they're concocting as many boogeymen as they possibly can get. So it'll take away from local control because they can't go back to that it's going to fail people that are underserved and people of color. That was just demonstrated. That's BS. So they're going to we gotta get together, guys. We gotta think of other ways to stop this from happening. The idea of vouchers is not going to get any support from this legislature. I would hope a research study on pay and celebrating and supporting charter schools and homeschools would. But guys, look at this place is like a petri dish of sometimes bizarre conspiracy theories. I mean, come on, okay? Why don't you just ask these people, why wouldn't you support charter schools that are performing well? Why wouldn't you support schools that demonstrate that Native Alaskans are doing well in that system? Why wouldn't you do that? You know, we have a program called ANCEP, right? Oh, ANCEP, serving underserved Native kids. My daughter was in that, she's an engineer. A lot of kids from rural Alaska would have never thought or dreamed they could do something until the environment and the opportunity was created. Because a lot of them believe they couldn't. And a lot of people believe they can't because they're hearing a lot of silly stuff. And I just refuse, I hear it all the time. Dunleavy's doing this, Dunleavy's doing that, Dunleavy's doing this. Obviously not enough people believe that or I wouldn't be standing here in front of you. One of the other two guys would be. Their campaign promises didn't pan out in terms of a vote. So, Sean, you're going to hear a lot of weird things here if you haven't already. And it's going to get weirder. But all I'm asking you guys to do is really say, whoa, wait a second. Why wouldn't you support something that's working for kids, especially kids that are of color or underserved? Why wouldn't you? Well, Dunleavy's trying to do it. Well, forget that for a moment. Why wouldn't you support something? Ask them the question. Ask them the question why they don't want to find out if significant amounts of money in the hands of teachers will change or doesn't change that outcome. Why wouldn't you want to find out? Or is it okay just to do exactly what we've been doing? Let's do exactly what we've been doing. You know why? Because nothing will change. Just give me the check. Everything will be fine. If we believe that, look, if there was a fight to get charter schools in this state to begin with years ago, it'll destroy everything. Homeschool, holy mackerel. I remember that in the 1990s. I remember going to one of my associations, the School Board Association, which I was a member of. We got to stop this. Why? Well, because we'll lose kids. Well, why would you lose kids? They didn't even say to themselves, well, maybe because we could do a better job in keeping our kids there. Look, I'm not going to ask you guys a personal question here. Some of you may or may not have kids. I held a kid, so I know one's gone. Your world is going to look very different now. And you are going to make decisions, and your wife is going to make decisions that you never thought you would be talking about, because your kid is the most important thing to you. And if you don't do that, as to where they're going to go to school, how they're going to be schooled, and we don't know what life is going to bring. But you're going to try and find the best environment for that child to succeed in. That's all that parents want. Why are we trying to kill it? No vouchers, but go ahead.
The districts, though, districts are concerned that a board you appoint solely will be able to authorize charter schools, and then districts will be compelled to run them or pay for them.
No, in regulation, all that stuff will be worked out. We're not going to stick it to school districts. We understand that these things cost money. Okay, they got upset with the reading bill. They wanted to stop a reading approach. You're supposed, that's the fundamental thing in doing in school is to learn how to read. Oh, no, we don't need it. Yeah, if you look at the scores, we need it. We don't have to focus on it. Yeah, you kind of do. Ask Senator Begich that. He didn't believe that. He believed what I believe, that all kids can learn if given the right environment. That's our moral imperative, not voucher boogeymans. I got a meeting here in 30 seconds. We'll do this more often, okay?
Thank you, Governor. Thank you.